Practice? Are we talking about practice?
I just want to know, Steve, are you seriously asking this question? Or are you just quoting our friend Ted Lasso, quoting Allen Iverson to one of his players?
Whoa, wait a minute. I was quoting Allen Iverson. You brought in the elite coach Ted Lasso.
I did.
What are you talking about?
Well, I don't watch Ted Lasso, and I know you don't either, but it's a great story. You know, this guy doesn't know much about soccer, but he shows up and he kind of brings all these cliches and stuff in. And my son loves the show, and so he'll send me clips. And there's a clip of him where he's basically calling out his franchise player for not wanting to practice, and he just goes completely Allen Iverson mode on him. Like
I did not know about this.
Yeah,
this is cool.
Really cool.
I want to watch it. Well, what's the quick backstory on Allen Iverson?
On the Allen Iverson part. So, 2001.
Because we may have some listeners that have no idea what we're talking about, because this is over 20 years old now.
Yes, it is an iconic sports moment and gets quoted all the time, but it's a long time ago. So anyway, 2001, the 76ers with Allen Iverson as their best player go to the finals, which was like huge. And they played the elite Lakers team with Shaq and Kobe, and they lost, but it was impressive. So the Sixers going into the next season thought they were going to be really good, but they weren't. They had a really, really average year. So this clip came after they had lost in the first round of the playoffs. And there was some friction between him and his coach, and the coach didn't think he practiced hard enough, and they kind of aired the dirty laundry in the media. So the media was talking to Allen Iverson about practice, and that's when he went here.
That's when he went, practice. We're talking about practice, not
something
the game?
Like 20, 22 times.
Over 20 times.
Practice in there. It was.
Yeah.
And then Ted Lasso, just he goes right along with it. It's really cool to see them go side by side.
So you mean this, Nate?
Yeah, right. You hurt. It's as simple as that. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. I'm hurt. Simple as that. But it ain't about that at all. It ain't about that at all. You're sitting here, you're supposed to be the franchise player. And then here we are, talking like you get some practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we in here talking about practice. We're talking about practice. You understand me? Practice. A game. Not a game. Not a game. Not the game you go out there and die for. Not the game that I go out there and die for. Right? You feel like it's your last, right? No, we talking about practice, man. And play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We talking about practice, man. Practice. You're not supposed to be out there. You're supposed to lead by example. You're shoving it all aside. I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside. So here we are, Danny. We're talking about practice. Not a game. Not a game. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We ain't talking about the game. We're talking about practice.
Is that what you were talking about?
That is what I was talking about.
You were talking about Ted Lasso and Allen Iverson talking about practice.
Exactly. I think it's a great conversation to have.
It is. And that's what episode 88 is about.
Episode 88 is all about that.
Let's go.
Yeah, I just to bring everybody up to speed, we've been talking about this whole values and rules arc.
Values need rules, rules need values.
Chicken the egg kind of thing. Back in episode 84, we talked about that, introduced the idea. And then in episode 85, 86, 87, we talked about some different scenarios: homework, team parties, social media. And then today we're getting to some values and rules around practice.
We're talking about practice.
We are talking about practice. And if you really want to hear the rest of that stuff, great opportunity to go find us on wherever you get your podcast, but especially go find us on YouTube. And while you're there, you can subscribe and join the Stop Parenting, Start Coaching podcast. And welcome to the family. If you're new, welcome back to those of you who are loyally listening.
Awesome. I got a question for you on this whole practice thing, Nate.
Question away.
I feel like this may not be so peachy with the kids. It may actually come off as preachy to the kids.
Peachy and preachy. I like that. That didn't
Just
even
made
come
it
up in
up.
episode prep. That's
Just
really
made it
cool.
up. You know, Allen Iverson and Ted Lasso have me, you know, thinking.
They got you in creative mode. Why should we practice when we can just create like that? This is a very easy one as the parent, as anything to come off as preachy, because when one of the greatest lessons we all learn as we grow up is the value of putting in that work. And we also have a very different perspective on it because we're looking back. And for most of us, we come a little bit from a place of regret. Like, I wish I would have worked harder at that because now I realize how much I love it. But now is my time's gone.
Is this one of those conversations that starts, if I could go back in time?
Yes. Almost an Uncle Rico type of thing. Or if we could go back.
Uncle Rico makes it into the episode. Nice.
Hey, you get that time machine and you shock yourself and you go back in time and you get another chance. And so part of our challenge as a parent is to, again, it's not about us. We can't make them practice the way we wish we would have, because we might love the game now, but we love it for a very different reason. They're playing it and they love it because whatever, time with their friends. And they're probably not even aware of why they enjoy it. Like, they're like, yay, sweet, I get to go do basketball, or I get to go perform my play, or go with my choir group. And they love the friendships. They love the connection. They love other things about it, but they don't necessarily love the skill or the game itself, which often gets developed over time. And so as parents, we got to be super aware of this. It's easy to get preachy about it.
Yeah. I kind of have a flip-flop situation where when I was a young player, I really loved practice, but I also really loved the games more. But I never didn't want to go to practice because I just loved to play. I know as a coach, though,
you ended up as a coach.
Well, I know as a coach, I loved practice more than the games. I liked the games. I enjoyed it. I knew it was for the kids, and
say that like Allen Iverson. I like the games, but I'm talking about practice. I love practice.
But I really love the teaching as a coach. I love the teaching, the building, the prepping, the scheming, the leading up to the performance, which was the game. So should we dive into some conversation starters? That's kind of been our pattern through this series. You want to start us off? You want me to start you off?
Well, there's the really catchy one, and you can, like, not to get preachy with it, but you bring up the concept by saying you practice like you play. Right? Practice like you play. We say it all the time, and then you just ask, how do you feel about that? Do you really think that you practice the way you play? Ask them what their experience has been with that.
Yeah, because as coaches, you often say, hey, you're gonna play in the games the way you practice. That is usually said when practice isn't going so well. Yeah, as an attention getter. So I like your play on this to in advance get you thinking about how you want to play in the game. So that factors directly into, so how do you want to practice?
Yes.
Yeah.
It gets at the values that are underneath practice. How do you, as a performer, as an athlete, how do you value practice?
I like it. Here's a simple one. Sweat equity.
You hear that a lot. That's a good, real estate term?
Yeah.
You help build the house, but it's terrific. Sweat equity. Tell everybody what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean by that is my wife and we painted the interior of our first college apartment.
And what did that give for you?
I don't know. A couple $100 off or something like that. Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an investment.
Ooh,
You're
what a great word.
you're investing in yourself. You receive a benefit from it. And of course, like the word sweat.
Boy, Steve, I think you just hit on something that would be great with the parents to ask their kids is how is practice like an investment?
Because they're probably viewing it as a cost.
Yeah. Something I have to do
Something I have to do.
that
Yeah.
doesn't pay off in the long run. There's one of my favorite follows has a rule in his family. They don't ever say I have to do something. It's I
I
get to.
get to. I
Yeah.
get to do
I
something.
get to practice. And that's more of the investment mentality. I love that word. And I think that's a valuable tool for parents to work in. Another great question that I love for just kind of a conversation starter, but getting your kids to think about and talk about what role does practice play for them? Where do they see practice? Do they look at it as an investment? Getting them to be aware of how they're viewing practice. Great story. If I can jump into a story,
Yeah.
there's a young man that about 4 years ago was a freshman basketball player that I had the honor to work with. And this kid was one of those kids, like he's kind of a coach's dream. Stays after practice all the time. No, you never asked him to. He just planned it into his day where he would stay after practice 15, 30, 45, sometimes even longer minutes working on his game, working on his shot. And then 4 years later, you see him being the most consistent contributor on his varsity team. And there's not a coincidence there. You know, he's become that guy for the team where he can consistently show up and perform in games because of that extra practice time he put in.
Sweat equity.
Good example of sweat equity.
Here's a situation that it could be applied to any performance activity. Really, I mean, almost anything, but we're talking to parents of high school athletes and performers here. So let's go with a music route because the man who is speaking right now once quit his piano lessons and regrets it. I regret that I quit my piano lessons. But sometimes even somebody, a teen, a young kid who loves to play, loves music, they don't always like practice. They don't always like practice. And so if you set up a focused time period, real intentional focus on I'm going to practice for this amount of time, maybe it starts as something as simple as 15 minutes, because I would argue, Mr. Crandall, that 15 minutes of very focused practice, distraction-free, quiet environment, away from the hustle and bustle of the rest of the house, I would argue that 15 minutes of real focused, deep work and practice is better than 45 minutes of garbage practice with constant interruptions and distractions.
I think that's
So
totally true. That
it
gets at
becomes
that quote that you hear a lot where people talk about you overestimate what you can accomplish in 10 years and underestimate what you can do in one.
right.
And focus is a huge part of that.
And this becomes a multiplier. You have some compound interest working here where 3 to 4 times a week, 5 times a week, 6 times a week of 15 minutes, 30 minutes, you determine the amount of time and it's super focused. And then give yourself a reward after. Maybe it's like, okay, you can go on your phone or you can do this or whatever.
You can eat the big piece of chocolate cake.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. But to me, that's better than just, hey, whatever, random. And so that's a conversation to have with your teens about what their practice is like. How can we improve your practice? And I know for a fact that is one way to really improve your practice.
Yeah, turn it into deep practice. 2 quotes came to my mind while you're sharing that. One, Joshua Medcalf, everything is training for something.
I had a feeling that was going to show up in this episode.
Has to. It's
because I hear it from you all the time, and it's right on. Good job, Joshua. It's right on target. Why is it on target?
Well, it's because it's so true. Here's one thing I love, having done the 25 years, 30 years of coaching and working with teens that I've done, is you find these quotes that resonate with kids. And so this is something that just from experience, kids love that quote. It rings true to them that everything is training for something, and it provides them a little bit of perspective and motivation where it's like, okay, this is why I need to be on time to class, because everything's training for something. How I do one thing is how I do everything. That's a Ben Hardy quote, or maybe even a Dan Sullivan quote. But
Or maybe even like Socrates. You never
could
know.
be
Everything's a
everything's
remix.
we're on the same page with that. It gets them to look at what they're doing as it matters. It's values. It's their values showing up, and it helps them create rules. The other one that came to mind is a Brendan Burchard quote. If you leave your growth to randomness, you'll always live in the land of mediocrity. So that deep work idea, training and practice is doing it intentionally. And that's what helps you get to excellence and avoid the mediocrity.
Excellent, Coach Crandall.
Let's give the parents some great questions
Let's
that
give
they
them some
can
great questions.
reflect on or ask their kids.
Sure. I'll start us off with one. And this is basically your point of view, your POV.
Oh, what a buzzword. Buzzword
Your
bingo.
your POV of practice. And I think it's more valuable to find out your team's view of practice. So how do they view it? Do you view practice as a punishment, or do you view it as a privilege or opportunity?
Good, tough question. Another one I find is great for helping increase the sense of value for practice. Do they celebrate the small wins and look at those and notice the little progress? Or is it only about celebrating the results in the big moments?
Yeah, let's bring in a football analogy. That's a great one. 3 yards in a cloud of dust all the way down the field is not as glitzy and glamorous as a 95-yard touchdown pass. Give us another question, Coach Crandall.
If your dream coach or your dream director was watching you practice, what would they say about your practice? If Mike Krzyzewski or Dean Smith walked in and was watching me run a practice, what would they say about my practice? What would they say about my players and the way they were practicing?
If you're listening to this, Coach Crandall was flashing his UNC hoodie at the time. Coach Smith, he's old. I'll flash my Stonehenge shirt, if you're listening. Anyway, those guys are as old as that now. But Nate, you and I, we're getting older. We're getting old.
108 is old. We're not even
hey,
close.
Just a few years ago, I had several basketball players. I was in a situation with them. Most of them did not know who John Wooden was. So, yikes. Yeah. Anyway, I like that question about, the dream coach. And you were mentioning earlier about reflective questions for parents. Here's a great reflective question for a parent. And I want you to pontificate upon it. And it simply is, how do your own work habits influence your team's approach to practice? So going into the whole modeling thing.
Well, it goes right back to that quote about how you do one thing is how you do everything. Then the Joshua Metcalf quote, everything's training for something. If I act like that as a parent, if I treat my approach, the things I do with my work, my practice, whatever that might be for me.
Practice.
If I treat it like that, I'm modeling it. Everything's training for something. Am I holding the door for my wife when nobody is watching? Am I leaving her little notes, things like that? Because that's going to show up, and my kids pick up on that stuff. And I better have my A game going all the time. Parenting's the hardest job. There's not a close second. And this is why, because you're always on display, and your work ethic, your approach to whatever your practice is going to go a long way towards helping them build their view of practice.
Love it. And yes, parents, we were talking about practice.
On behalf of Steve Galley, I'm Nate Crandall, and we thank you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in to this episode. If you love what you're learning from the Stop Parenting and Start Coaching podcast, we would appreciate it very much if you would leave us a 5-star review and some glowing comments. We also encourage you to share this episode with your friends and family who are parents of athletes and performers. And if you want to explore further and see what Steve and I are creating to help thousands of parents, athletes, and performers, please visit our company's website at createtransformbecome.com. That's createtransformbecome, all one word, .com. There you'll find a growing number of resources to help you elevate your performance. Thank you again for your support, and we encourage you to create a magical relationship with your athlete and performer.